Hello there, Pursuing Freedom friends. This is your host, Erin Bradley. Thanks for tuning in today. We've got a great show in store for you with my friend Damon Lembi. And I'm really excited to dig into this one because Damon is not only a rock star in his own right as a multiple time best-selling author, host of the Learn It All podcast, CEO of the company Learnit, a live learning platform that has upskilled over 2 million people. But this guy has such great stories about the journey of everything from navigating imposter syndrome to going through the lows and coming out on the other side to the highs and all the things that all of us entrepreneurs face and struggle with. And so I'm going to pass the mic to Damon because I think we have a lot to cover in a short amount of time here, and I don't want to waste too many of my words on our time. So, Damon, I would love for you to introduce yourself to the audience and share a little bit about your journey of being what you said, a learn it all instead of a know it all, which I really love.
Thanks. Well, Erin, thanks for having me. I'm honored to be here. And yeah, my name is Damon Lembi. I'm was born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area. And in high school, when growing up, it was all about playing sports. You know, if it was baseball season, I was playing baseball, basketball, football, whatever. Big Bay Area sports fan. And by the time I was a sophomore in high school, I realized that if I was going to play in college or pro, that my best bet was baseball. Baseball was my ticket to the next level. So I went all in on baseball, worked really hard, and I did pretty well. I was a high school All-American, and as a senior in high school, I was drafted by the Atlanta Braves in the 13th round, and that was really my first difficult choice. I had to decide, am I going to go the minor league route at 17 years old, or I had a full ride to go to Pepperdine University. And my parents were super cool. They're like, "Hey, look, this is your life, your decision. We'll support you either way." So I thought about it and I ended up going the college route. And the reason why I did it, and it's kind of helped me with my background as a leader, is that the coach, Hall of Fame coach Andy Lopez, he had this great vision and a moonshot dream of Pepperdine was going to win the College World Series. And so Pepperdine was a 2,500 person school, and I mean that's a pretty long shot when you look at you're playing against LSU and Arizona State and all these massive schools, but he put together a good team. He invited me to come in and to be a big part of it as a third baseman. So I joined Pepperdine, and that's where I started off in my baseball career.
And then where did that lead to? Because you made a big jump from being a baseball star to now being an executive coach, a company owner, and all the things in between. So, how did this story unfold for you? Did you end up playing pro?
So how it unfolded for me is so I was used to being the best around, I mean, high school American, got to play in the Olympic festival, all this. And then you get to Pepperdine and everybody, Aaron, was as good as I was. And I wasn't used to that. And I really struggled with self-doubt, imposter syndrome, limiting beliefs, you name it, right? And I was paralyzed, in a sense I didn't really want to go out to the field. I was homesick. And really one of the first stories that sticks with me was in fall ball. We had our first player coach meeting, kind of like a performance review. So I go into the office with Andy Lopez, who pretty much I was scared to death of. He was intimidating. And so he's like, "Damon, have a seat." So I sat down, and before I even adjusted my chair, he leaned forward and he said, "Son, when we recruited you to Pepperdine, we did so because we thought you would be a great talent, a star hitter in the middle of our lineup, and make an immediate impact. But unfortunately, after these last couple of months, we don't think you have the talent to even play Division One baseball." And Aaron, he sat back and he crossed his arms like this and just sat there looking at me right in the eyes. And I was just like, man, how do I get out of here? I just want to either cry or get on the next flight home to see my parents or whatever, right? And before I had a chance to respond, he leaned forward again and he pointed at me and he said, "Damon, that's not what we think about you. That's what's in your head. Me and the coaches, we see your talent. You could be a great hitter. You could be a strong third baseman, but there's nothing we can do to get you out of your own head. You need to take that amongst yourself." And so, I mean, that was like a huge shock for me, right? I was like, from whatever. And so I'd like to tell you that I immediately left Coach Lopez's office and turned things around and, went on and had a great career at Pepperdine. Unfortunately, I got hurt and I had to leave, and I couldn't transfer from one D1 school to another back then. I had to go to a junior college, and the year I left, they actually won the World Series. So it's amazing, it's amazing setting a moonshot dream like that, getting everybody bought into your vision, and winning the World Series. So I mean, that's a pretty and crazy story. I get to junior college, and fortunately enough for me, a coach from Arizona State finds me and says, "Hey, you know what? We want to give this guy. We think we want to give you a full ride to come play at Arizona State, which is a fantastic baseball school." And I'm like, "Cool. I'm excited about this." But a lot of my friends, not my family, but a lot of my friends and people I knew said, "Hey, you know what, Damon? There's going to be 17 guys trying out for first base at Arizona State. You know what you should do? You should go to a smaller school, someplace you can play, get your degree, and then just, forget about baseball and move on in your life." But I'm like, screw it. This is my last chance. I've always really wanted to be a baseball player. So I went to Arizona State. I was the first guy on the field. I was the last one to leave, gave it my all. And not only did I make the team and win the first base position, but I was number 2 in the league in hitting. I was a all league, and I hit a home run in the College World Series. Like my wife's like, "This is glory days." It's like 30 years ago, but but anyway, and there's so much more in there. But yeah, so I did all this, and I'm like, I proved myself here. What's the next step for me? The next step is to get drafted, which I was supposed to be drafted in an 8th to 10th round. And I remember like it was yesterday. I'm in Omaha, Nebraska, pre-internet. This is 1995 and 1994, waiting for my call in my room. My roommate was Jacob Cruz. His call comes early, first round draft for the Giants. Like 10 other people on our team got drafted. My call never came. Wasn't drafted. That was just like a huge shock for me. And so here I was, 22 years old. My identity was all wrapped up as being a baseball player. I didn't know anything else, and that dream is basically gone. I mean, I probably could have, went and played internationally or whatever, but the wind was taken out of my sails, so to speak. So I'm 22 years old, and I wasn't sure if my what to do next. Kind of lost.
And so where did it go? I mean, this is like a huge turning point. I'm imagining some kind of deflated feeling of like lost and maybe a little emotional rock bottom and
Totally.
your identity. Like how did you get through this to the other side?
Fortunately for me, I came from a big real estate family. We had a mortgage company, hotels and apartment buildings, and all kinds of businesses. My dad was a great entrepreneur, Walt Lembi. Unfortunately, he passed away 14 years ago. But he had all these different opportunities, for me to go work. But I was super intimidated because I didn't know if I never had a job before. My job was baseball. And so he was also starting this computer training company called Learnit, and he was doing so because he was trying to find a way to digitize his portfolio instead of being paper based. And so, like a lot of great entrepreneurs, he dragged one of my sisters, Chelsea, to a class, and the instructor was, boring. The environment was sterile, and he's like, "There's got to be a better way to do this." And so he came up with this idea for Learnit. He hired his CFO from our savings and loan and said, "I want to have short, quick classes. I want to have like magicians or comedians teach class, and I want them to be inexpensive, and I want them to be fun." And this was opening up literally in June of 1995 when I was getting out of school. So I took a job there as a receptionist, and I did that for a couple of reasons. One, I didn't want to be like, here comes Walt Lemby's son with silver spoon in his mouth and put at like a senior level. And two, I didn't know if what skills I had. So I figured I'm just gonna suck it up, start at the reception desk, roll up my sleeves, and work hard. And just learn as much as I can, even learn how to use computers. This was back in the DOS days. And so I did that, and it was tough. It was tough at first. You look at my best friend, Jacob Cruz. I'd leave work as a receptionist. I'd go to Candlestick Park, see him hit a home run in the rookie season and everything. But he'd after the game, we'd go get drinks for dinner, and he'd be like, "Dude, you could hit that guy." It's like you should have given an opportunity. But it is what it is. But Aaron, one of the things that I learned early on, or I saw early on, it was a lot different on the baseball sports world than it was in the business world. Like people just didn't have the same work ethic, and competitiveness. And people were showing up late to the office. People weren't disciplined. You lose a deal, nobody seemed to care. And I'm just like, I just don't get this, right? This is not what I'm used to. And so I just worked really hard, because also I wanted to prove my parents gave me so much growing up and so much support. I'm like, I want to contribute as well. I mean, I had big shoes to fill with my dad and my grandfather for all the stuff that they did. So I just wanted to give back. And so Learn It was my little thing. My dad never worked at Learn It, but we'd stop by and get drinks and dinner and stuff. But I went from teaching classes. I learned how to teach classes. I thought, hey, if I teach classes, I can save money and I could learn how to do this. To doing sales, I started closing deals. And about 4 years into it, the CEO wasn't working out. The board was looking for somebody new. We had about 70 employees at the time, and they brought in some people from the outside. I threw my hat in the ring and I said, "Hey, why don't you give me a shot? I've taught more classes. I mean, I've taught classes. I've answered phones for 3 years, so I knew what was going on here, and I've helped out with the IT." And my dad was great. He's just like, "All right, kid, we'll give you a shot." And this was back in 99, 2000 in San Francisco, the dot-com days, right? So, just having a fax machine that worked, everybody was selling and doing well. And so here I was, I thought I was a 26-year-old genius as CEO. And I really wanted to expand because I looked at all my friends and they were these paper millionaires. And here was little Learn It. And I pushed my dad to expand, which we did, even though he was kind of against it, but he gave me the opportunity to do it. And then in 2001, crash. The dot com bubble fell apart. And to be totally honest, if I didn't have my family's financial support and backing at that time, probably wouldn't have made it. But they believed in Learn It and they believed in me. And like my dad would like to say, you got one of the most expensive MBAs he's ever seen for business. And so, but we made it through that in 2001. And over the years, Learn It evolved from being just a computer training company to like a holistic, I want to say like well-rounded learning company. So it's all B2B. And we work with companies to help build learning cultures and equip managers with skills that maybe they didn't have before. Still teach Excel classes. And then 2009 came around again, and there was the Great Recession. And of course, I mean, I know you're in there probably with the mortgage business and everything, probably. And unfortunately, my family's real estate business, you know, pretty much fell apart. Got over leveraged. Things didn't work out too well. Things were tough at Learn It. And but I learned from what happened in 2001 and the struggles we had. And I knew I didn't have the financial backing of my family then. So we made the tough choices that we had to make, and Learn It made it through there, became stronger, and been here ever since. So June of 1995 to 2025 will be our 30-year anniversary. And it's been a wild ride. I've learned so much. Never in my life did I ever imagine I'd be in the learning and development. I mean, I went to Arizona State. I mean, at the time wasn't a fantastic, uh, learning wasn't number one, but it's amazing the curveballs or the the way life goes and the pivots you have to make. And so then, yeah, I mean, so I'd say last year, April, I wrote a book called The Learn It All Leader, and I just kind of share my my experiences, my stories, and how I've become the leader I am, and that I played for three Hall of Fame baseball coaches, so I learned a lot from them as leaders. I've learned a lot from my dad, and so I just wanted to share what I've learned in leadership. The cool thing about being at Learnit is you get to see behind the scenes of all these companies of all sizes and how their leadership works, both good and bad. And I wanted to share my story and also let people know if I can do it, you could do it too, and that's where I come up with the learn it all versus know it all as well.
It's so ironic, and also I'm so grateful for you sharing this journey because when you talked about whatever that was 1995, and first of all, the conversation that you had with your coach when he gave you this feedback that kind of set you back to the
Totally.
point of nearly in tears, and then he said, that's not what we think about you, that's what's in your head,
Right.
and until you get out of your head, you'll stay stuck right there. I mean, that is so powerful, just from the perspective of, there's a saying that I heard years ago, and it's very adaptable, but the idea that when you surround yourself with good coaches and mentors or communities where you can borrow the light you see in someone else, meaning you see somebody else has been able to persevere or overcome challenges or experience struggle and never give up and still find a way to thrive in spite of everything they've been through, then you're borrowing the light you see in them. You can feel inspired by their belief or their willingness to keep going in the face of adversity. And then there's the other side, which is then sometimes you have to borrow the light they see in you. And I think it's really powerful because it feels like that's what happened that day with that coach of yours, where he's saying, I can see the potential in you. We can all see the potential in you, but somehow you're going to have to find a way to see it in yourself, or you will not be able to move through this. And to experience, the 2001 bubble burst and the 2009 crash and how that affected the company and how it affected your family's real estate portfolio. I mean, that is a lot to navigate. And I just appreciate your transparency there. And funny enough, this morning I was telling us, teaching a workshop and sharing about these other failures. A lot of people know about the early failures when I first got into the world of entrepreneurship and fell flat on my face, but that wasn't the last one. It's almost like every 5 or 6 years there's something that just knocks you straight on your butt. Like you're just knocked right down. It could be a tragic life event. It could be a market shift. It could be a miscalculation, right, of scale in your business and going too far too fast, like being over leveraged, all kinds of things. But it's the perseverance and the adaptability amidst the turmoil that really determines the story that you end up leaving behind. So one question I have for you here is that you mentioned earlier about how your identity was wrapped up in baseball, and you kind of had to humbly move into this role of receptionist, and also with all that imposter syndrome and also the fear of being judged by your coworkers because you were the son of the owner. I mean, there's a lot there, right?
Right.
Now it's a couple decades later, you've navigated a couple other redefining moments, if you will. What does it mean? What does it look like for you now looking back? And if you were talking to somebody else who feels kind of stuck in the fixed mindset of their identity, right? The inability to see beyond the limitations that their brain creates for themselves. Like, how do you now see evolution of identity and evolution of self and business and things like that? Because there's no way that people are listening that can't relate to something that you just shared right there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. I used to, like I said, I identified as a baseball player, right? And that was, but that I found out over time that that is just, somebody gave me this analogy where it's like, that's just like one vehicle at a time. That's, you just jump on and you jump off of that vehicle. So really, my identity is really somebody who I'd like to say works hard, um, is adaptable, perseveres, has a growth mindset, is authentic. Those are all the things. Those are all the things. Is a great dad, hopefully a good husband. All of that, right? And so that is really what the identity I should identify as, not as I'm a baseball player or I'm a CEO. Because Erin, like you said, stuff happens. And you need to be able to adapt and pivot and grow and change. And what I really would say to my younger self and to everybody else is just the ability to have an open mind and to keep going. I think that one thing I've learned over the years is real learning takes place when you get out of your comfort zone and you put some of this fear behind you. Because I think especially me, back in the day, I would just be so worried about what other people would think all the time, right? Like if I screwed up on the baseball field, or I went to work and I blew it on a presentation, people would laugh. At the end of the day, who cares? I think people have their own lives to worry about, and I just think it's a lot more rewarding, and a lot better in learning to just get out there and try things. Try things. Hear people, for everybody out there in sales, right? You have to get no's. Let people say no, learn from that, and just keep moving on. And when it comes to overcoming imposter syndrome and self-doubt, uh, what I talk about a lot is I built like a three-step framework. I didn't really know I built it. I just reflected back on over time, and it goes all the way back to taking that scholarship to Arizona State. I outworked everybody, right? So that's something that all of us can do, is just work hard. There's no step. Number one is, well, before you even get to your steps, you should think about, what is it that's bothering me? What am I afraid of? Okay, I'm afraid that I'll get up on stage and I'll blow it. Okay, is that the worst case thing in the world? No, it's not. I'm afraid I'm not going to make the baseball team. Okay, so what? I can deal with that, right? So first, label your fear and know that you can overcome it. Whatever. Look, we've all overcome our worst fears, to date at least, right? So number one is understand that. Then step number one is work hard. There's no replacement for hard work. Then step number two to me is focus, deliberate practice, right? So if I'm having a hard time hitting a curveball, then I take 1,000. I take, I get pitched 1,000 curveballs, or I'm struggling on giving a presentation. Just deliberate practice. Focus in on what you want to get better at. Just one little thing, because it's easy to procrastinate, right? It's easy, like, okay, this is tough, so I'll scroll on social media, or I'll jump on and answer some emails. But you just stay laser focused. So once you've worked hard, you put in a deliberate focus. Then step number three is, whether you step into the batter's box, or you go and give a presentation, or you take over this job and become a new leader, just learn and let go, right? I mean, you've put in the effort, you've done all that work, just give it your best shot. If you do fantastic, great. If you fall on your face, okay, let's figure out what you learned that you can do differently next time. But as I said before, I think we're always too hard on ourselves, and you should, instead of looking at the results, you should look at the process and the work you put into it, and just give yourself a pat on the back, because we both come across so many people who either have the victim mentality, which drives me nuts, or aren't accountable, and going out and trying something, and even if it doesn't work, say, hey, it didn't work. I'm going to figure out what I could do different next time, learn from it, and move on.
I love it. I mean, it was making me think about this analogy that I have a giggle at, as it relates to the fear of trying, right? And how, whatever that looks like, wherever you are in your journey, you've been told that if you could do X, Y, and Z, you're going to get better results, right? And then we start over analyzing it. And are we going to be perfect? What's somebody going to think of us? All these things. And then there's some, I don't remember the actual words for it, but there was some analogy of a baby learning to walk. And, they have to try and fall and try and fall and try and fall. Can you imagine if there was a baby trying to work or trying to walk, and you're like, God, you suck. You suck at this.
But that's
Like,
what happens. That's what happens to adults, though, right? I mean,
right?
because as a kid, you don't care. You just go for it. You do it, right? But
Yeah.
as an adult, you stop being as curious, or you're afraid that you're gonna fail, right? So
Yeah. And the fact is that everything gets easier with reps. Like learning to walk, it gets easier. And most people are lucky enough to eventually be pretty good at walking. And learning to ride a bike, you try, you fumble, you get on, you fall down, you scrape your knee, you get up, you keep going, and you get better with reps. Like in everything in our childhood, we keep going until we get better. And you're right, as we get older, we become afraid and we want to get from the first try to perfection with no bruised knees on the way. And it's not even fun to think about that. I always think about the fact that I think I forget what book it was, but it talks about how you're always desiring something new. No matter what you achieve, you will achieve something, you'll celebrate for a little while, even if it was more than you ever imagined possible. And inevitably, you have a new desire. And so, if you don't feel a little imposter syndrome, if you don't feel a little bit of discomfort, then chances are you're playing small. And when you play small, I don't feel like it's that much fun. I think that we all have this inkling inside of us that we're called to more inherently as human beings. And that when we resist the call to more, whatever that means for us, we're doing it out of this fear, right? And so to imagine that life is always you on the leading edge of the next unfamiliar territory is kind of fun. It's like instead of needing to know how it's all going to play out, we can look back and realize we didn't know this was all going to play out. We didn't know our paths were going to cross, but here we are having this conversation. So, what is it that drove you to put together the Learn It All book and then the podcast? Because you've been running this company as it's evolved for many, many years. So, what's kind of the underlying message that you felt compelled to get out to the world as it relates to the concept of Learn It All?
Well, I would go back to your last statement. I don't think everybody wants to do things new all the time. I think unfortunately there's too many people who are stuck in their comfort zone. They're just I think people like me and you and a lot of the guests that you have on your show and your listeners are like us. They want to continuously get better, Because if you stay in your comfort zone and you just do the same thing all the time, well, that's not very exciting and you're not going to really progress, I believe, right? You're just stuck. And so I think it's great to stick your neck out there and try new things and learn and grow and evolve. And if you're somebody who's listening and maybe you're like, well, yeah, maybe I should do something different or something new. I mean, you should think about it and go for it, because I think it's a lot more rewarding and it gets a lot easier over time. When I started off as a podcast host, I was awful, but every time I did it, I get better and better. My sister laughs at me and says so, and I'm still far from. I think you always continue to get better, but you got to start somewhere with it, right? And you got to start somewhere and ask for feedback and get better. So, as for to answer your question about my book, I was gonna write a story about, my family, and I have a lot of good stories, and, about my family in San Francisco and real estate and everything, and my wife was wonderful. She really wanted to push me to do it, and a lot of it was because, my kids never got to meet my grandfather or my dad. Well, they met my grandfather, for a little bit. They never met my dad. So for my book, started off as that story, but then it kind of morphed into my the whole learn it all thing and becoming a leader. And so I wrote it because I wanted them to know about my family. Two, I wanted to help out other people in my situation, whether it's somebody transitioning from sports, somebody who lost their career, and needed to make a career pivot, that you can do it through some of the stories and things I spoke about. And number three, really, like I mentioned, I've been able to see behind the curtain from all these great organizations, right? And leaders, people who've done things well and people who have, aren't fantastic leaders. And you can learn probably more from that than you can from other people. So I wanted to be able to share those stories, maybe to help people prevent them from making some of the mistakes I made or other people made. And finally, I've really had a great team over the years. Some people have been with me forever. Some people have moved on and they're part of our Learnit alumni. And so I wanted to share a lot of those stories, because my life has basically been surrounded outside of my immediate family with these people from Learnit. I'm going to dinner next Tuesday with a guy who's the CTO of Autodesk, who started with me when he was 20 years old, and so having had impacted our team along with all of our students, we've had over 2 million help upskill over 2 million people over 30 years. It's been pretty rewarding. And I just wanted to give back and share with people that, if you have a learn it all mentality, where you come in, you're humble and you work with integrity, you're curious, you have the courage to try things and you hold yourself accountable, it's a heck of a lot more exciting than if you're a know-it-all. If you're somebody, Aaron, who's got it all figured out, right? They have all the answers. They've reached their peak and nobody else knows what's going on. So yeah, that was kind of my premise behind my book. As far as the podcast, I did a bunch of guesting and I became friends with the podcast host. And they're like, you really got to start interviewing people as well and get their stories. And as we mentioned before, I'm like, I'm super enjoying it. the Learn It All podcast, just bringing on people like yourself and others and hearing their stories. And what I found is the vast majority of the most successful people are the most humble and the most vulnerable. And they're okay with sharing. They're not afraid of people thinking they're weak or whatever, right? And they want to help and they want to give back. And so it's been a great opportunity. And I know you mentioned this beforehand too. It's like you get to spend an hour or so with these people, and it's a tremendous learning opportunity. And you get done with these calls, and then you're super inspired by them. And so it's almost addictive after a while.
I could not agree more, for sure. I love this so much. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time, Damon, to share your inspiring story and the overcoming of adversity and the continuing to be curious and learn and seek out what's next for you. So if folks want to follow you or find you, where are the best places to find you online or connect with you?
I'm trying to be pretty active on LinkedIn. So find me on LinkedIn. Please check out our show, the Learn It All podcast. And then our website is learnit.com.
And to all my friends out there listening, thanks as always for tuning in. I really appreciate you being here. I hope that you're finding value. And if you are, if you get a takeaway, please shoot me a message. Send me a DM on Instagram at Pursuing Freedom Official. Let us know what you learned from Damon today, what inspired you, what action you're going to take as a result of it, because we want you to not just be inspiration junkies, but to be action junkies, right? So go out there and implement and have fun doing it. And if you feel inspired to do so, make sure to leave that 5-star review wherever you're consuming this, because it helps us continue to attract amazing guests like Damon, help this content get found, and encourage more people to build a life you don't need a vacation from. I love you. I appreciate you. I'll see you next time.